Last month, I featured a game called 9 Childs Street on one of my videos, and I explained how the demo is very intense and can be one of the most spooky experiences you can have in a video game. But to avoid repeating myself, let me remind you of what I said about it in my previous video. 9 Childs Street is an indie horror game where the protagonist is a child. The main focus being on the frightening environment and the feeling of dread the player experiences. As the journey progresses, you will encounter supernatural occurrences and uncover the chilling secret of the householder. The plot is unique, and it will definitely capture your interest. Not so long ago, an old, solitary gentleman inhabited a house across the road. Yet he has since disappeared, and the house's lights are no longer lit. You are playing the role of a curious 9-year-old boy called Armin, who is wondering what happened to his neighbor. One night, he noticed a light in the apparently abandoned house, and without a second thought, he grabbed a torch and explored the peculiar house clandestinely from his parents. Your mission is to investigate every corner of the residence and search for any clues that can explain the mysterious events. But be careful, you will also discover that you're not alone in the house. Even though there's only a demo of this game and the full version is yet to be released, but trust me when I tell you that the 20 minutes that you'll spend playing it will make you glad that it doesn't get any longer. The good news is that after a whole year of waiting and suspense, the full version was finally released a few days ago in February 16th. But the main topic of our video today is not the game's features and experience. We're actually going to focus on something else, which is the story. And to be precise, the dark, real-life story that inspired the developers to create this title. In the game, the abandoned house used to be inhabited by a man who was renowned for making toys, and specifically dolls that look exactly like children. In fact, they're too realistic in a way that makes you believe that they're not objects, and that they actually have some sort of life in them. Well, I guess you already understand where I'm going here, because if you played the game, you probably realized that the dolls in it are not regular ones, and that they're actually made from the bodies of real children, or at least their body parts.
You are our salvation. It is not finished yet. The doll maker made the doll from our best body parts, but he didn't have time to insert the heart. But it's okay. Soon it will tear out your heart and become kind, and we all will finally rest in peace.
I'm pretty sure it's very hard to believe that this shocking behavior in the game was inspired by real-life events, but I'm sorry to inform you that the true story might even be more disturbing than the game itself. The mysterious man we're talking about today is the Russian historian and language expert Anatoly Moskvin, who was also an expert on local cemeteries in his hometown of Nizhny Novgorod, Russia. He was an incredibly talented man, as he could communicate in 13 different languages, visited a lot of countries worldwide, and had a professorship at a university. Additionally, Moskvin was a journalist for Nizhny Novgorod, which is Russia's 5th major city. But one of his darkest features was that he had a fascination for graveyards and proudly called himself a necropolist, to the extent that one of his colleagues said that his works were invaluable. Learning these facts about him will probably make you think that this guy is a smart person and a hard worker, and he doesn't look related to anything about the game. But at the same time, I have a feeling that the part that talks about the graveyard's fascination gave you a weird glimpse into his personality and started to trigger your suspicion. If that's the case, then your senses are leading you in the right direction, because Anatoly didn't use his capabilities for educational purposes only. He also utilized them in dark conduct and actions, or to be accurate, the right word should be rituals. Because he literally took his knowledge about cemeteries to the limits, and it was all revealed in 2011, when law enforcement apprehended him. after the bodies of 29 girls ranging in age from 3 to 25 were discovered mummified inside his house. At this point, many of you will obviously think that Anatoly was a heartless serial killer, and that he was hiding the bodies of his victims. But to be fair, he wasn't that crazy, and he didn't actually kill anyone. Instead, he was a body snatcher, and for those of you who don't know what that is exactly, it simply means the illegal removal of dead bodies from graves, morgues, and other burial sites. Anatoly was renowned for his knowledge of the graveyards and tombstones in his city. His fascination with the morbid arose from an occurrence in 1979, when he was 13 years old. Mosfin discussed this occurrence in a magazine called Necrologies, which is a periodical that focuses on cemeteries and death announcements, to which he regularly contributed. In his final article for the magazine, Anatoly talked about the incident where a bunch of men in black suits took him away from school while he was planning to go home. They were on their way to the funeral of a 9-year-old girl called Natasha Petrova, and Anatoly was made to accompany them to the girl's coffin, where he was compelled to kiss her corpse. Anatoly wrote in his article, "I kissed her once, then again, then again." Then the sorrowful mother of the deceased put a wedding ring on Anatoly's finger and also placed a ring on her child's finger. He claimed that this caused him to trust in sorcery and eventually become captivated by the deceased. Whether the story was factual is of little consequence at this point, as his ominous musings were not addressed for more than 3 decades after that incident. But considering the shocking discovery in 2011, it's clear that this occurrence that happened in the 1970s affected his mentality completely. With that being said, let's now ignore the past a little bit and focus on the time period where he started to go completely crazy. His actions started to draw attention in 2009, when people in the area were horrified to discover that the graves of their family and friends had been vandalized and, in some cases, completely excavated. The authorities back then believed that this sabotage was done by extremist groups and individuals involved in organized crime. But this assumption didn't lead the police to anything for the next 2 years. But it all changed in 2011, when the rate of graves being desecrated in the city of Nizhny Novgorod reached a very high level in a way that Anatoly couldn't make it unnoticeable anymore. And that's when the police finally caught their mysterious suspect. However, the officers were not shocked during the arrest of Anatoly. The real shock happened when they went to his apartment and discovered something that they wouldn't expect even in horror movies. He was living with his parents in a cramped flat, despite the fact that he was 45 years old at that time. According to reports, he was lonely and had the habit of hoarding things. When the authorities entered, they found life-sized doll-like figures scattered around the apartment. These figures were similar to old-fashioned dolls, wearing elaborate and diverse attire. Some had knee-high boots, and some had faces with fabric and makeup on them, with their hands hidden in the fabric as well. Although they looked like dolls, the sad, dark truth is that they were actually the desiccated bodies of young girls. Law enforcement personnel discovered that when one of the bodies was shifted, a melody began to play, as if on command. Upon further inspection, it was found that numerous of the dolls had music boxes implanted within their chests. Police also found various things in the place, including plaques, photos, directions to local graveyards, and manuals for making dolls. They also noticed that the clothing worn by the mummies was what they had been buried in. Anatoly confessed to stuffing the bodies with rags, covering their faces with nylon tights, and putting buttons or plastic eyes into their eye sockets so they could watch cartoons with him. Additionally, some of the bodies had personal items and clothing inside them, such as a piece of the gravestone with the name of the deceased, a hospital tag with the cause of death, and even a dried human heart. Anatoly stated that he had been excavating the graves of young females as a result of his loneliness. He declared he was alone, and his greatest wish was to have kids. However, Russian adoption services would not grant him permission to adopt a child, as he did not earn enough money. Furthermore, he said he had done what he did because he was anticipating science to discover a way to bring the deceased back to life. In the interim, he employed an uncomplicated technique of salt and baking soda to maintain the girls, and he marked the birthdays of his dolls as if they were his own offspring. It's complicated to understand Anatoly's personality or intentions, because at his core, he actually believes that he was doing a good thing for the little girls, and that he only wanted to give them some joy and companionship after their death, which explains why he never accepted to apologize to the children's parents, even after his trial, which ended by putting him in a psychiatric institution after he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Personally, I don't know exactly how to describe him because his case is too strange for me to comprehend, but I really want to know your views and opinions about this bizarre and disturbing story. Are you among the people who believe that Anatoly is a psychopath who committed a horrible crime by violating the sanctity of dead bodies and vandalizing cemeteries? Or do you think that he's just a mentally unstable person who suffered from loneliness and wasn't actually trying to harm anyone? Regardless of our opinion, the only people who have the right to determine the impact of what he did are the poor parents of those innocent kids, especially given that they had to deal with a second tragedy beside the death of their children. And that's exactly the pain that Natalia Chardimova went through when she discovered that the body of her 10-year-old daughter was stolen and mummified after her murder in 2002.
Что я очень страдал от одиночества, особенно в летний период времени, когда родителей не было и когда они забирали кота. Значит, соответственно, я работал за компьютером. У меня такая работа журналистская, что я много чего писал, в основном за компьютером. Я им включал, я их рассаживал, у них были просверлены дырочки под глазки, соответственно, я им включал мультики, я им включал детские песенки, я им сам пел песни, которые мог, но потом, обычные детские песни, то есть то, что бы я стал петь, когда у меня будет живая дочка. И, соответственно, после этого мы с ними ели, вернее, ел я, и мне просто предлагал еду. Но как это все положено в кельтской и якутской традиции, я считаю, что культура древних кельтов и культура средневековых якутов очень похожа. То, что я бы делал бы с живыми детьми, то я делал с этими. Я считал, что они живые, просто